The video, Creating a Pivot Table, illustrated how you can base a pivot table on an Excel data range. This is certainly one way to do it, where you spell out the range address. But an even better way is illustrated here, where the data source for the pivot table is an Excel table. In case you are not familiar with Excel tables, there is another companion video, Excel Tables, that you probably ought to view first. I will base a pivot table on the same data you've seen before, the online purchase data set you see here. However, I have purposely separated the last two columns and the bottom several rows from the rest of the data to make a point later on. Actually, I have inflated the bottom few values in the total spent column to help make this point. I will begin by selecting any cell in the data range and clicking Table from the Insert ribbon or pressing Ctrl-T to create a table. I will accept Excel's guess for the data range and click OK. Now I have a table, as you can see from the banded formatting and drop-down arrows in row 1. Also, from the Table Tools Design ribbon, you can see that this table has a generic name, which you can change if you like. I will rename it Sales Table. Next, I will create a pivot table in the usual way. But I will accept Excel's suggestion to base it on the table rather than on a range address. You might think the two options are equivalent, but they aren't, as you will soon see. I will now drag some fields to the blank pivot table to get the same type of results as before. So far, nothing is different. However, I will now go back to the data sheet and copy the data at the bottom and at the right so that it becomes part of the table. Finally, I will return to the pivot table. It doesn't look like anything has changed, but in the Pivot Table Tools Options ribbon, I will click Refresh. Because the pivot table is based on a table, and because the table just expanded, the pivot table now recognizes the new data. The sums in the pivot table have increased, and there are now two new columns available for the pivot table. For example, I will replace total spent with total saved in the values area. So if you believe your data set might expand sometime in the future, it is definitely a good idea to create a table and then base your pivot tables on the table. This will save you a lot of work down the road.